When is the real Thomas Dolby going to stand up? I see this kind of parallel in a way between what I do and the silent movie heroes. I always felt that I was a kind of underdog character, you know. I wasn't the sort of macho rock star with a big codpiece and doing scissor jumps in front of the drum riser in great pools of dry ice or anything like that. And I think it was always my personality that was the best thing I had going for me, not my mug. And so that's why I saw this kind of similarity between what I was doing and the silent movie heroes, people like Chaplin and Keaton and Lloyd. Because in a way, a video is very similar. You don't have any dialogue to help you out. And so I try and get a little bit of slapstick humor into what I do.
I used to bang on the kitchen implement. You know, I get out the kitchen ladles and bang on them. I was forced to sing in a choir when I was at boarding school in England, you know, and so I learned very fundamental sort of, you know, music theory from that. But I never studied formally. It's mostly self-taught. You know, a lot of the musicians I know don't read or write music. It's not essential, you know, to working as a musician. It's a pretty good idea if you want to go into film work. You know, it's like I scored some movies myself, and I kind of, at that point, that was the one time that I really wished that I'd learned about orchestration and, you know, notation and things like that. The pop stars of the day were people like Simon Le Bon and Adam Ant and Sting and so on. So I wasn't sure if this scientist image was really gonna work for me. But my then girlfriend pointed out that if I could maybe hire a bona fide scientist, then it would make me look like a pop star. So I started thinking this through, and I thought, well, if I'm going to be a
a scientist, I'm going to be a cool one. I need at the very least a hot Japanese lab assistant and a vintage motorcycle combo. And I started coming up with this weird sort of story about this home for deranged scientists. And I wrote this down in the form of a storyboard and took it to my record company, EMI. And they said, okay, so who are you going to get for the bona fide scientist? And I found a copy of like an actor's catalogue, and it turned out that I could hire none other than the great BBC scientist, Dr. Magnus Pike. And he was hireable by the hour or by the day, and so I got him down to my studio, which in the time you had to walk through a meat packing factory in a Victorian trading estate to get to it. And I got him in front of the microphone, and I'd given him a list of the things I wanted him to say, and he said, now what was it again, Dolby? And I said, yeah, I need you to say, she blinded me with science. And this is what he said.
She blinded me with science.
So Dr. Pike, that's fantastic, but it's not really a question, it's sort of more of a statement, to which he said,
yes, but as a known scientist, it would be a bit surprising if the girl blinded me with science.
I said, well, just humour me, just give me some wild tracks, just say science a few times. And he sort of went,
science.
Well, that's pretty good, maybe just rev it up, just take it up a level. And he said, well, give me a beat, Dolby, something I can jam with. And, so, I happened to have a beat lying around, as one does. And so I played him a beat and went sort of something like this. And he gave me a few wild sciences, like, that's sounding good. Now give it some stick. And he went, fantastic. I thought, it sounds like a hit to me. So I took the groove over to my Jupiter 4 and my Jupiter 8 and started adding a few little licks here and there, and it was this sort of jazzy thing at the beginning, sort of I thought, okay, all sounds a little bit sort of Herbie Hancock somehow. I don't know if that would really work in the pop charts in the UK. Let's try something a bit different, what hasn't been done. And I thought, okay, there's these dance grooves coming out of these New York clubs, with these fantastic synth bass lines. So, okay, now we're getting somewhere. I thought maybe a little oriental sort of flavour to it. I went to my Jupiter 8 and sounding pretty good at this point. Maybe you put that together with the jazzy thing and the oriental thing, maybe we're going to get somewhere. So it's all right with you, I'll sort of show you what happened next. By the way, almost any celebrity is hireable, just so you know.
Hey everybody, welcome to another classic album deep dive, and judging by the title of this video, you might be thinking to yourself, what do you mean this is not a classic album? Yes, it is. It's absolutely a classic album, and I will tell you right now, I am going on record as saying this is my favorite synth pop album of all time. And I know that's a bold statement to make, but I can tell you unequivocally, this is my favorite synth pop album. Forget about Depeche Mode, Soft Cell, New Order, all those bands. They're all great to be sure, but this album stands, to me anyway, head and shoulders above all those. It's just my favorite. You may disagree, and that's entirely fine, but I am telling you, as for me, favorite right here. And as I was going through pulling my records for this, I didn't realize I have 4 copies of this album. So that's telling you something already, how much I love this album. So anyway, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but nonetheless, Thomas Dolby's The Golden Age of Wireless, and growing up watching MTV, my first exposure to this album was the song, as I'm sure for most of you, any of you who grew up back in the 80s, She Blinded Me with Science. That video was on heavy rotation. When we got cable back in 1983, I think it was, that video was being played constantly. And I remember thinking, I really like this song. Seemed a little bit bordering on novelty. The video was kind of goofy. Thomas Dolby looked a little nerdish in the video. But I kind of dismissed it like, okay, yeah, it's a cool song, but I never went any further than that. I think I might have heard Radio Silence or seen that video somewhere, but that was like as far as that album went for me. I saw Hyperactive, and that was an even goofier video, but that was from the next album, The Flat Earth. And so that was as far as my exposure to Thomas Dolby went. And then it was probably, I think in the 90s, when I was shopping around and I found a used copy of The Golden Age of Wireless. And I remembered, I liked that song, She Blinded Me with Science. And so I picked this album up. And I was really totally blown away by how great this album was. And if you're thinking that Thomas Dolby is a one-hit wonder, it's number one, it's not accurate. And number two, I really encourage you to give this album a shot because it is completely everything that I love about synth pop. And it is really one of the earliest synth pop albums. It was my first exposure, actually, probably to synth pop. I hadn't heard Soft Cell to that point. I think the only synth pop I had really heard was Human League, Don't You Want Me. That was about as deep as my synth pop knowledge went at that point. So that was kind of the gateway to enjoying and appreciating synth pop. But the album was released on May 12th, 1982, and honestly, there are 5 different versions of this album, and I've got two versions with different track lineups, if you will. I believe this was when the album was first released in the US, and it does not have She Blinded Me with Science on it. It's got Europa and the Pirate Twins, which was another single, Flying North, Weightless, Leipzig, which is not on the classic Golden Age of Wireless album. And it also has Urges on it, which was also not on the classic version of this. So it was released in the UK. The US released it with different artwork. Curiously, this album cover. And then when She Blinded Me with Science came out, was kind of a hit on MTV. Then they adopted the UK cover and they put She Blinded Me with Science on side 1, and they removed Urges and Leipzig off the album. Now, I am a huge fan of both those songs. And so whatever version you find, you're probably going to end up finding what I consider to be the classic version. It opens with She Blinded Me with Science, and it does not have Leipzig and Urges on it. Both great songs, by the way, but if you want both those songs, you're going to have to pick up a copy of this, or I think find a UK pressing. But to me, the best version of this album is the classic one. I've got 3 copies of this classic album. How did that happen? I don't know. But every time I see one, I guess I grab it. But anyway, so I'm going to be talking today about the classic version of this album. And basically, Thomas Dolby, he grew up, he had a very average childhood. His dad, I believe, was an agricultural engineer or something like that. He didn't have any formal musical training, but I guess he picked up the piano and keyboards and just learned, kind of self-taught himself, and was a studio musician. I know he played on Foreigner's 4 album. That's him on the keyboard on the song Urgent. And then he branched out and released his first studio album, which to me, I'm glad he did. It is such an excellent album, and I'm so excited to do this episode because I can't tell you, and people who know me know I love this album. I'll take any opportunity to talk about this album because I feel it is so special. So anyway, going to get into the classic lineup song track listing of this album. So it opens with She Blinded Me with Science, which is an excellent single. And the thing that I love about Thomas Dolby is, first of all, I love the analog synthesizer. I have such an affection, such a nostalgic, warm feeling for the analog synthesizer, and it's all over this album, starting with She Blinded Me with Science, which is a fantastic single. Separate it from the video if you feel like the video kind of gives it a novelty flavor, but it is an excellent song. It's got a great melody, great use of the synthesizer. Everything that I love about the analog synthesizer is on this track. And yeah, it's a little bit, I love the quirky lyrics though. And Thomas Dolby definitely is playing into the whole scientist, nerdy kind of image that surrounded him. But I love this song. It is excellent. The next track is Radio Silence, and there's two different versions. The version which is on here is, I guess, the rock version. You've got like electric guitar. It's a little bit more of an organic kind of a rock and roll, new wave rock song. And there's a version which you can find on Greatest Hits, which I think is the original version, which is more in keeping with the synth pop stylings of this particular album. Either version is great. I don't have a preference for either one, but I love Radio Silence. And if there is a theme, I guess, for this album, it's kind of like communication, technology, kind of wistful nostalgia for the technology growing up. But Radio Silence, in whatever version it is, it's just a great up-tempo, poppy, new wave song. Absolutely love it. Then the third track on here is Airwaves, the first synth ballad, as it were, and there's such a mood that he establishes, and I call it like cinematic soundscapes. Each of these songs is like its own little micro movie soundtrack, and Airwaves is just a gorgeous track. The way that he uses the synthesizer, and they're not cheesy. I liken it to the way that the Police use synthesizers on the Ghost in the Machine album. But Airwaves is a beautiful, gorgeous ballad, and I'm going to give you a little sampling of it right here. And I am going to be playing most of these, the full song, and I really hope you'll listen to these and you'll appreciate it and love it as much as I do.
Strange how the scale forms in tiny patterns on my antenna and the 5 o'clock show. Hello, hello. Brooklyn is crawling with famous people. I turn my vehicle beneath the river west from south. Through the airwaves, people never read the airwaves. Do we only feel the airwaves? I really should have seen through the airwaves. Electric fences line our new freeway. Here in the half-light, the motorhomes leave here, knee deep in water, under a pylon. How slow my heart beats, how thin the air I'm breathing. Through the airwaves, people never read the airwaves. Do we only feel the airwaves? Most time I'm out of street level airwaves. Dampness of the wind, the airwaves. Tension of the skin, the airwaves. I really should have seen through the air. Be in my broad cost. When this is over, give me your shoulder. I need a place to wait for morning. No, it was nothing. Some car backfiring. Please don't ask questions. I itch all over. Let me sleep. Through the airwaves, people never read the airwaves. Do we only feed the airwaves? First time I'm at a street level airwaves. Dampness of the wind, the airwaves. Tension of the skin, the airwaves. I really should have seen through the airwaves. People never read the airwaves. Do we only feed the airwaves? First time I'm at a street level airwaves. Dampness of the wind, the airwaves. Tension of the skin, the airwaves. I really should have seen through the
The next track that we have is Flying North, and this actually opened the UK version of this album. And it's very weird to think of this as an opening track because I feel like the song sequencing on this version is perfect. Just like I feel the song sequencing on the Beatles' US Rubber Soul is the perfect definitive way. Flying North is a great, again, it's another up-tempo track. Synthesizers, keyboards are used very tastefully. They add such color, such texture to the song, but it's an up-tempo, very exuberant kind of a song, and I love it. It's what Thomas Dolby does best, and there's always this kind of dark undercurrent to each of his songs, and they all have this, you know, they're all colored by the analog synthesizer, but they're done in such a cool way. And I don't want to say it adds a little bit of menace, but it definitely, there's an edge to each of these songs that he brings. And Flying North is just great. And then the last track on side one is Weightless. And Weightless is a gorgeous, gorgeous track. It's a little bit of a low-key kind of song, but the keyboard, the synthesizer on here sets such a cool mood, and it's hard for me to find words to describe it, and that's why I'm gonna play this for you with a video I made. I just want you to appreciate the music, and hopefully the video complements the song, which I absolutely love.
Some nights he's weightless, he has to travel. His mouth is gravel, and there's an empty feeling within his heart. Eye on the fuel gauge, Westchester Thruway. That triple octane won't contain the empty feeling in Dolby's heart. Same old insecurity, strapping into his car seat, and a sump started leaking all over New Jersey. Gas stations everywhere, not one drop to fill me. Fill me. Fill me. Yeah. Fill me. Big hunk of carrot cake blueberry milkshake, fistful of cold drinks, won't fix the empty feeling in Lizzie's heart. So she flick on the TV, taking a movie, but all those memories wanna raise the empty feeling from in her heart. Then a dog woke inside her head to watch the explosion, and a pipe started leaking, and she bent to the basin. Fruit juice everywhere, not one drop to fill me. Yeah, fill me. Fill me. Whoa, fill me. You could be the one, she whispered. Listen. Love is all you've ever wanted, all you'll ever need. End of our summer, your body weightless in condensation. My heart learned to swim, and the feeling was gone again.
Side 2 opens with Europa and the Pirate Twins, which was a single. I don't know if it was his first single. I believe it was a single before She Blinded Me with Science. But nonetheless, very cool, elevated synth pop track. Got a little bit of harmonica actually on here, but a very catchy chorus, great melody, great, fantastic synth pop song. And I don't know how it did as a single, but it should have done fabulous because it is just a great song. Then we have Wind Power, which again, the way he uses these analog synthesizers is just so cool. And when you think about a song being entirely built around an analog synthesizer and being so interesting, so engaging, and Wind Power is exactly that. And yeah, it's a drum machine, but it's done in such a fantastically cool way. Love Wind Power. It's just great. Then we go into Commercial Breakup, which is, it's almost like a very cool driving song. It's one of the fastest tempos on the song, and it moves along at such a brisk pace. And it's all done on the synthesizers, the different textures, the different sounds that he gets out of his different synthesizers is so cool. There is some guitar on here, so it is more kind of like a guitar-based track, but I'm going to play the whole song for you here because it is just amazing. I love this song so much.
Say, what was that grin you grinned? An expression so uncertain that breaks the line so thin. Well, now a duty and a duty beckons. The color is high, it seems so right. Don't touch the line, oh, something has struck me in the heat again. Hey, Francie, what about your symphony? We're living through the breakup. This is the breakup. Commercial breakup, commercial breakup. Here it comes again. Night is so bright, y'all. Transmission smooth. I take my head and I take my head and stuff it in the tube. I find something that I can use with this. No credit when no credit is due. It cost me $10. But the tubey beckons, the color is high. It seems so right, so alive. Something that's up in the heat again. Hey, Francie, what about your symphony? We're living through the breakup. This is the breakup, commercial breakup. Oh man, they're waving from the street again. Hey, Francie, come on to me. We're living through the breakup. This is the breakup, commercial breakup, commercial breakup. Here it comes again.
And the next song, I love all of these songs. One of our Submarines, I believe, was the single right after She Blinded Me with Science, but it set such a mood. I believe Thomas Dolby's uncle perished in a submarine in World War II. And so this is basically recounting his uncle's experience on the submarine, or somehow his family's finding out about losing his uncle. But it is, again, the synthesizers on here are so gorgeous. OMD is one of my favorite synth pop bands, and you can definitely see how OMD borrowed a lot of the textures, a lot of Thomas Dolby using the synthesizer as this cinematic way to express the music very cinematically, very colorfully. And I'm going to play that song right now as well. And then the last song, the gorgeous, absolutely epic Cloudburst on Shingle Street. A very low-key kind of a ballad, but again, the way that he uses these synthesizers, it's so cool, and it's great nighttime driving music. This is an album that I play on Spotify, like when I'm having a bonfire or just looking up at the stars, because it is so beautiful, it's so gorgeous, and I'm going to play it for you right now.
Just as well, you stay here with me. Private hell, a town of key. Blindly into the cloudburst overhead. I wanna get my face wet. It's been buried in the sand for years. Then take this vest of plaster, these boots of concrete, and mark it down as surplus. Return to Marbury.
So as I said, I've got somehow 4 copies of this album. This is the original copy that I had. And then I got, it's so funny because I got this copy too, because if you notice, Thomas Dolby's written below the margin here, and Thomas Dolby is on the margin up here. Different enough for me to grab a copy. This was kind of a cleaner copy, so I picked up that one. I also, they did a reissue, and I picked that up because I love this album. This, as I showed before, is the original US version of the album with Urges on Leipzig. By the way, this is Leipzig, and I love Leipzig, and you're going to see why right here. It really belonged on this album. I'm so sorry it didn't make it onto the classic track listing, but it's a gorgeous track.
Trains are running late as you close the garden gate. Stepping through your steel front door frame. Dinner's in the microwave, sweetie. Leipzig is calling you, Henry. On the cardboard thoroughfare. Leipzig is calling you, James.
And then the last one I have, this is actually the EP. This was released before the classic US version of this album. This was when the single came out. This was the EP. And then they said, you know what, we might have a hit on our hands. And so they took it from here and they put it on the classic version of the US album. So anyway, that is my deep dive into this amazing album. I do hope you check it out. I hope if you find it, you buy it. I hope you've enjoyed these sound samples. And hope you like these videos. And I hope I didn't get too geeked out on my Thomas Dolby fandom. Check out his other albums too. He's got a handful of other great albums, starting with The Flat Earth, Aliens Ate My Buick. Pick any that you find up. You won't be disappointed. Take care.